Hello.
Hi.
So as some of you might have read, my show is called For Love Turn East. And when I say turn east, I mean the Eastern civilization, right? Because there's a God-created line that separates the Eastern and the Western society. But how do you differentiate that, right? Because the reality is, that even, like, there's a wonder if the line came first or the differences came first. But there are some differences, right? The West is usually synonymous to progress and the East to mysticism. The West is about technical industrial innovation, and the East is about expertise in those innovations and stealing the jobs. The West is about colonization, and the East is about dictatorships. So you see, like, we do come together when it comes to oppression, but the oppression is also very different. The West, the oppression through colonization is a little on you, on some other people. In the East, we have a very self-destructive tendency. So whatever we do, whether it's just choosing dictators or becoming dictators, we tend to go a little self-destructive. And what's the best way to be self-destructive? Passionately be in love. Now the thing is, the East doesn't have a monopoly on love, does it? But what we do have is these dramatically passionate poems and stories, which in the West it doesn't even compare. Like, for example, how many deeply passionate and self-destructive love stories in the West do you know? Romeo and Juliet? Great Gatsby? What else? Like, there are some, but how many? But if you really think about this, right? We know Gatsby and Romeo and Juliet are fiction. But in the East, I come from India. Just in India, we have around 10, 15 tragic love stories. People think, people know they're actually true stories. And the poems and the songs, like 200 years ago, one of my favorite Urdu poets, who also wrote in Persian because Urdu was too street for him. We do this shit. So in Urdu, he wrote this couplet, which is still very deeply imbibed in the society. ये इश्क नहीं आसा एक आग का दरिया है. ये इश्क नहीं आसा, बस इतना ही समझ लीजिए, एक आग का दरिया है और डूब के जाना है. Ishq, love. I'll come to this later. This love is not easy. Understand this. It's like a lake of fire. Ishq is like a lake of fire. And the only way to cross it is to be submerged in it. Now, if you pay attention to ishq, right? Ishq, muhabbat, love is not the literal translation. It comes with the passion, self-destruction, losing yourself, submitting, devotion. I'll tell you another Sufi poem that was composed by, I think, Amir Khusro, which goes something like, which has a lot of musical renditions over the years, and it still survives, which is Chhap tilak sab chheen li re muh se naina mila ke, baat agham keh di ni re muh se naina mila ke. Which kind of means that you've taken away my identity just with a glance. You have said everything unsaid, agham, just with a glance. These are the kind of poems you read when you're growing up. You try understanding love and the inherent self-destruction. But the stories, I was talking about stories, right? 10, 15, like, you grew up, there's no way you miss out on those stories. A bunch of Bollywood movies around those. And for all the stories, the three I really like. There's a story of Mirza Sahiba. Mirza Sahiba is the only story amongst all of them where Mirza, who's a warrior, goes to the wedding of Sahiba and kidnaps her. Because That's not okay. This is the only story where the lover doesn't sit down and cry and stay. He fights. Now this story is amazing, and its tragedy is very unique, and it tells something about the society. But growing up, I was a very non-violent kid, a Gandhian. So Mirza Sahiba was a little problematic for me. I couldn't see myself as Mirza. Let's put it that way. Then there was another one, Heer Ranjha. That is, Ranjha the guy, he becomes an ascetic, a jogi, when the love doesn't work. And over the years, Sufis have used the love between Heer and Ranjha to compose poems to talk about their love for their murshid, their guru, or to God. I really like that. But the story where I saw myself a lot is also the story which is the most popular love story in East. I think Syrians, Iraqis, Iranians, Indians, Pakistanis, everybody thinks it's their story. It's the story of Layla Majnun. It's the story that deeply echoes with me. I always saw myself as Majnun. Over the years, there are different narratives, right? But I want to tell you the correct narrative. The narrative, which actually matters. Everything else is a lie. So I'm just going to tell you. So long, long ago, in a small village in Iran. Yes, it happened in Iran. But so in a village in Iran, which is just like any typical village long, long ago, right? The houses of mud. But there are also richer people with slightly bigger houses. And there's a mosque in the village. And there is a graveyard in the village. And there are kids, horrible, cruel kids, because kids, who are in the village. But this village has a Majnun. Now, Majnun literally means somebody who's gone crazy because he's possessed by a jinn. Genie. Now, do not go to the Disney genies. That's an abomination. That's not how genies are. If you ever come across a genie, run. Genies are horrible creatures. If they possess you, you're done. But this Majnun was possessed by a genie, which is romantic. Because this Majnun composes a lot of poems and songs. He's crazy. He spends his nights in the graveyard. But everywhere he goes, he just writes poetry, deeply passionate love poetry. And somebody in the village will feel sad for him, so they'll feed him, and that's how his days went. Of course, the kids, as I was talking about, kids would pelt stones at him. And he would bleed, so somebody would dress him up. But Majnun's routine was this. He would spend the night in the graveyard, wake up, go to the masjid, read the kalmas, except he would not face exactly in the direction of Mecca. And he would sit outside the mosque, not go inside, face in a direction which is not Mecca, and read the kalmas and go, La ilaha illallah. And he would read all the 5 namaz. And that's how his days went by. In the village, there was this old man, fairly rich, with no kids. His wife had died. And he took a liking to Majnun. Because he saw that he was not a bad kid. He was not doing harm to anyone, even when the kids pelted stones at him. He would smile at them like an elder brother would. So he tried to get him home, tried to clean him up sometimes, but Majnun would end up in the graveyard and his routine. But the old man also noticed that every month, every few weeks, some person from another village would come in, clean Majnun up, and then go back. Clean him up, dress him with newer clothes. Every once in a while they would try to take him back, but he won't go, come back. Graveyard, namaz, poetry, Majnun. So one time when one of his friends was visiting, the old man got up with him and sat down to talk about him, and this guy started crying. He was a friend of Majnun. And he told Majnun's actual name was Qais. He was given the name Majnun because he went crazy. And Cass was deeply, deeply in love with a girl named Laila. Laila was married to this old man's village. Majnun was so deeply in love that as kids, if Laila was being punished, if she was being beaten, wounds would appear on Majnun's arms and legs wherever Laila was being beaten. Now you have to be Eastern to understand that this is true. And as they grew, they started growing up, Majnu somewhere got the notion that poetry is the only way to win Laila. And he would compose poetry all the time, he would spend all the time around her. And when Laila's family learned that this is how crazy this dude is getting, they got her married off. And whatever sanity was left in Majnun left after Laila was married. So he would spend all his time just composing poetry. He would not come back home. He would spend his time around mosque. Several months later, when Laila came back, she was really sad to see Majnun in this condition. She tried to talk to him, but Majnun wouldn't recognize her. And Laila was deeply, deeply heartbroken. Or so everybody believed, because when she came back to her husband's village, this old man's village, she died. So what Majnun does now is, in the graveyard, he actually spends time next to Laila's grave. And the old man felt very deep emotions of affection for Majnun. Majnun's friend said, please take care of him, I have family, I can't do this. And the old man decided. So the old man decided, went around the village trying to find him. He couldn't. Then he realized, oh, it's time for namaz. Majnun will be at the mosque. So he goes to the mosque and he sees Majnun is sitting, smiling, laughing, is bleeding. The bunch of kids who are being berated by their parents. So he understood that the kids had pelted stones at Majnun. He's bleeding. But there's a very kind smile with which he was looking at these kids. He was not angry at them at all. It's like as an elder brother who would laugh at the younger brothers being berated by parents, there was affection in his eyes. And the old man thought that it's not all lost. He can get some Maulvi to get rid of the jinn, and he can take care of Majnun. And then he will probably become Cass again. So he goes close to Majnun, starts trying to wipe his blood off. And then the azan plays. And Majnun sits down in the direction which is not quite Mecca. And the old man realizes he's not facing in a random direction. He's facing to the graveyard. And Majnun goes, La ilaha illallah. Except that's not what he's saying. And he focuses. And he hears, La ilaha illa Laila. There is no God but Laila. La ilaha illa Laila. Now that's the kind of stories we grew up with. Those are the things that shaped how we should fall in love. So, but I studied in a convent school in India, which meant I studied Shakespeare, Keats, Shelley, but we also had this influence, right? Whether it was Bollywood or the books we studied on our own, or the mythological stories that my grandfather told me when I was a kid. I grew up learning how to communicate through stories. So anywhere I would find stories, I had to listen to them. And these were the stories I grew up with. So you can understand that I was torn apart in two different personalities, right? I was one of the few kids who wanted their space because I studied in convent school. So I had some Western influence. I wanted my own room. I wanted my own space. So I left my parents' home when I was 15, and I was deeply ecstatic because I was free. I know nobody leaves their parents' home at 15. My parents loved me, don't get me wrong. It's just I really wanted to be on my own. But again, I was Indian, right? So I do like my social life as well. It's that's why I live in Amsterdam. There's a balance, right? If I was in India, everybody would be in my face telling me that I should get married. But if I was in the Scandinavian countries, I probably would go in an existential crisis. I mean, if nobody acknowledges your presence, do you even exist? So I was torn apart. I liked my freedom, and I thought I really liked my freedom. And a month passes, and then I see her. I would like to say that song started playing in my head, like la 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 la. It didn't happen, but it was. My email password became her name, and I shit you not, I was ready to give my favorite side of the bed. And if you think I was crazy about Bollywood songs and poetry before, now every song felt like it was written for me. It doesn't have to be old poetry, right? I'll give you an example of a new Bollywood song that was released during that time. It goes something like, आसमान कहता है रब से तूने चांद दो क्यों बनाए एक मेरा खाह दाग दूसरा है साफ साफ सबकी नजर उस पे जाए. Hi, which is, the sky asks God, why did you make two moons? One has is spotted and the other is spotless. Hi. Hi is not a word. Sky says hi. Hi is not a word. It's an emotion. And it's so difficult to bear. They're like, you exhale it out. And then God responds. रब ने कहा आसमां से भेज के ज़मीं पे हम भी पछताए. Hi. God goes, yeah man, even I regret sending her down on earth. Hi. So I really wanted to talk to her because these are the songs that felt like they were written for me. Except I couldn't. Why not? I blame my mother. Let me explain. So it's not an uncommon knowledge that Indian men are considered creep. Thank you. It may be true, it may not be true. It could be that we are a little too passionate. It could be that we are awkward. Or it could be that actually men in general are creep. We don't have authority on it. But what they did is, my mom, when she was bringing up me and my younger brother, she ensured that we knew every other day, you two will not make girls uncomfortable. So even now, when I want to approach a girl, a voice in my head goes, don't be a creep, don't be a creep, don't be a creep. How do I know this? I'm glad you asked. In therapy, 3 years ago. But then it's not just my mom. It's also my friend, poet, philosopher Ronan Keating, who said, you say it best when you say nothing at all. That's not how he sings, but I'm going to go with that. So I'm like, that makes sense. Words are too limited. But it was getting very difficult, right? 6 months have passed. You know how our bodies have a way of telling you how you feel, right? So give me a woo if you know what I'm talking about. Lump in the throat. You guys as well. Give me some sound if you know what I'm talking about. Lump in the throat. Woo. Heart palpitations. Woo. Butterflies. Woo. Horniness. There is another emotion which kind of encompasses, I think, everything. It's this part, this bone, like I'm melodramatic, but not that much. Not the heart. This bone, sternum, this feels compressed. This hurts. And it can be for anyone. Your parents, your siblings, your kids, your pets. And I used to feel this pressure all the time. So I really, really wanted to talk to her, but I couldn't. And then my friend, poet and philosopher Ronan Keating said, "It's only words. And words are all I have to take your heart away." So I'm like, that makes sense. So it took me a few weeks to gather courage, go to her. So I went and said, "Hi, can I borrow your maths notes? And then can I borrow your physics notes? And then can I borrow your chemistry notes?" I was a nerd. I lived in student housing. I didn't need her notes, but I would miss class so I could borrow her notes. And because I saw Majnun in me, right? So I had to be passionate. I had to. Study is very important. Like, I was a nerd whose losing 1 mark was problematic, but screw education. I'm in love right now. So I'd skip classes, borrow her notebooks, and that's all I would do. Then another 1.5 years passed. And my time in this city has come to an end because my studies are almost over. But this can't be it, right? I have to talk to her. She has to know. So the last day, what I do is I ditch my bike, I board the bus, go in the exact opposite direction of where I have to go, and get in the bus. And the bus is insanely crowded because India. And the bus driver is playing songs. Deeply, deeply romantic songs. But he was one of those really old souls, really dramatic old souls, because he was playing ghazals. Ghazals are very slow Urdu, Persian poetry, Laden poetry, which younger people don't like. I loved. And he's playing it in the bus. When I get in the bus, one of the songs I hear has this line, "Ek kami thi Taj Mahal mein, humne teri tasveer laga di." There was one flaw, one limitation in Taj Mahal. So I put your photo on it. But as I'm saying, the bus is crowded. I'm anyway, I don't have courage anyway. So I make excuse that it's crowded, I can't talk to her. And then, as it would happen, the place I'm standing, 2 seats next to me, free up. She comes and sits there, and the seat next to her is empty. But I still can't sit. I'm standing here, the people, it's empty, and I'm not sitting. So there's this friend of mine at the other end of the bus. He goes, "Go sit." He was a common friend. I think he knew. So he goes, "Sit." I'm like, and he goes, "Sit," which means sit or I'll come and sit. And my mind goes, "Dude, this is the last day. Just sit, no?" So I go and sit next to her. She's looking outside and it's raining. Now let me take a moment to explain. Rain is romantic, deeply romantic. That's also something that a lot of Easterners will understand. Also, in Bollywood, we dress up women in white clothes, send them in rain to dance and sing because logic. So we grew up in knowing that rain is romantic. So imagine this bus. I'm sitting next to her, it's raining and beautiful, beautiful, passionate poetry is playing. I can't talk. And then this song plays on the bus. It's a really old ghazal, which goes something like, "Aaj jaane ki zidd na karo, yun hi pehlu mein baithe raho. Do not insist on leaving tonight. Stay seated beside me." I've heard this ghazal 100 times before this. What I've never paid attention to is the lines that come after this. वक्त की कैद में जिंदगी है मगर चंद घड़ियां यही हैं जो आजाद हैं इनको खोकर मेरी जाने जा उम्र भर ना तरसते रहो आज जाने की जिद ना करो. Which means this life is caged in time. These are the few moments that are free. Don't lose them. Don't insist on living tonight. I'm like, So this pain that's been there, right? It goes. And then it just goes away. And the pedestal where I've placed her, she comes down and she feels like an equal. And I feel like I can talk to her. So I call her name. She turns back and I talk to her something. I can't remember. For the life of me, I can't remember. This was all the whole deal about not being able to talk. But I talk and she responds. She says a few things. I can't remember what. But we talk for a while. And I'm running out of things to talk about. So then she looks out of the window and there's a sly smile on her face. It's that smile that tells you that she probably likes you. She's probably liked you all along. And then she turns back and starts talking to me. And then I respond and I talk. You know how Indian roads have a lot of traffic, right? Not enough. So it was one of those days I wanted traffic, but there was not. And the bus reaches destination, the rain has turned into drizzle, and she leaves. And I come back to the hostel, and I'm devastated, but I'm also ecstatic. And my heart is broken, but it's also realized that she probably likes me. And this can't be the end, right? Love at first sight, songs telling me what to do, conversations in rain. This can't be it. So what I do is, I find out her address. Now let's take a moment to understand just because you think you're not a creep. So I find out her address. And I decide to pack some gifts. But it's late in the night and next day is my last day. So I can't go anywhere to buy something. So what I do is I get something that my mom had given me when I left home. It was a seashell with the carving of a palm tree and 4 alphabets LOVE. Please remember I'm 17. And the audio cassette. Remember audio cassettes, right?
Yeah.
Audio cassette of a Bollywood movie, Tum Bin. Terrible movie. Like, I know there are a bunch of people who like it. I don't. It's a terrible movie. The songs are like, But Tum Bin translates to without you. So I'm still being sneaky because I don't want to make her feel uncomfortable going to her house. But it's 17-year-olds. So I take this cassette, I take this seashell that my mom had given me, and I don't have a wrapping paper gift, any box, right? So what I do is I borrow somebody's shoebox, cut it down, wrap it, pack it properly, borrow gift wrapping paper from somebody and pack it up, and next day go to her house, which I found out, and I stand there and I knock. As I'm knocking, it dawns on me what I've done. Now, by birth, I'm a Hindu boy. By birth, she's a Muslim girl. People have been killed for less in India. At the very least, the neighbors are going to break my bones. And I'm shitting my pants. Let's say literally. I'm shitting my pants and I'm scared, but I'm frozen. You know that how body reacts? Flight, fight, or freeze? Yeah, the freeze thing was added recently. It should have always been there. I'm frozen there. And then she opens the door, laughs, runs inside to call her mom. And then my brain goes in two directions. One is, she looks younger. And the other brain goes, please don't call your mom. I'll leave. And then the other part of brain goes, oh, it's a younger sister. And in this conundrum, I'm not running away, and the mom is coming towards me. And in that moment, I feel comfortable. There's a cliche, right? Kind eyes. And it is a cliche because it's also lazy. But it is something that actually is true. Like, I don't know how it is. It's something like somebody comes to you with genuine curiosity, not interrogative curiosity, and is ready to give you space. Just in that moment as she was walking, I felt comfortable. So she sits me down, feeds me some snacks and sharbat, and asks me about my life with genuine concern and curiosity. She asks me what I study and how do I know her daughter, also where my family is, what do I like about studies, what my plans are, what I really like to do. And then we find out that we have a common interest, which is stories. And she gets excited. So we start talking about stories. And I'm fascinated that she actually knows a lot about Indian Hindu mythological stories. And my mind goes, this wedding can work, man. Religion cannot come in between, it'll work. And then we talk more. And then of course, the conversation goes towards love stories, the tragic love stories. And I get excited because I want to talk to her about my favorite love story of Laila Majnu. It'll also show that I'm so devoted. So she asked me, what do you like about Laila Majnu? And I say, death did not matter. Majnu's love persists even after Laila's death. And she smiles and she goes, what else? So I'm like, what's happening? Because suddenly she feels like she's smarter. So far, I was feeling like she was talking to me as a friend. And I say a few more things. Then she goes, you know something else about Laila Majnu? In that story, Laila doesn't matter. Laila never mattered. Majnu created his own Laila. So in one of the narratives, if you remember, Laila comes back. But she doesn't matter. And I go, yeah, that's right. I have no idea what she's talking about. I would like to say that I actually understood in that moment, but it took a few more years and another heartbreak to understand what she was talking about. Majnu had created his own Laila. The Laila that Laila couldn't live up to. And we all do that whenever we fall in love with somebody, right? We all create this image and put the person on a pedestal. And we do it for a reason. Without that, I don't think we can fall in love with anyone. But Majnu shows us the limit of it. It's such the extreme that the original Laila just doesn't matter. And it took me these many years to understand that in my story, this girl didn't matter. I'm sure if something had happened, we would have made it work. Or maybe not. I don't know if we would have been compatible. But what I do know is that this woman, this girl's mother, would have made an amazing mother-in-law. That's my story.